One of the bikers took an unconscious step back. Another rubbed the back of his neck, glancing toward his motorcycle as if weighing whether he should just leave. But the leader held his ground, his pride keeping him rooted in place. Then the man spoke. "Do you know who you're dealing with?" His voice was calm, even. The leader swallowed hard. "Who the hell are you?" James smirked, watching the cracks in their confidence deepen. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The man took another step forward, and for the first time, the bikers truly looked nervous. The younger ones shifted on their feet, waiting for their leader to make a move. But he didn't. He couldn't. The situation had spiraled out of his control. Then, from behind them, another sound cut through the air, the distant but distinct wail of sirens. It wasn't just one, it was several, getting closer with every second. James leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. "Told you this was gonna get interesting." The bikers froze. Their faces paled, and just like that, their bravado vanished. The wail of sirens grew louder, but the bikers didn't move. They were caught in a moment of hesitation, their tough exteriors cracking under the weight of the unknown. Their leader clenched his jaw, his eyes darting between James, the man from the SUV, and the road where flashing lights would soon appear. Then, just when it seemed like things couldn't get any worse for them, the second twist hit. A second SUV, identical to the first, pulled into the lot. The bikers stiffened. Another man, just as composed as the first, stepped out and gave James a nod. He wasn't dressed like law enforcement either, but there was an air of authority about him, controlled, professional. "Everything good here?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. James stretched his fingers, clearly enjoying the shift in power. "Almost. Just waiting on a few more things to fall into place." The leader of the bikers inhaled sharply. Who *are* these guys? He muttered under his breath, his earlier bravado all but gone. One of his own men whispered back, "I don't think we want to find out." The second man walked over to the first, and they exchanged a brief glance, like they were silently assessing the situation. Then the first man spoke again, this time directing his words at the bikers. "You should leave," he said simply. No threats, no raised voice. But somehow the words carried weight. The leader forced a smirk, but his confidence had thinned. "And if we don't?" The man from the SUV barely reacted. Instead, he pulled out his phone and tapped something on the screen. A second later, the sound of multiple motorcycles revving filled the air, coming from the other side of the lot. The bikers turned toward the noise, their faces draining of color. A group of riders, larger than their own, was approaching. And these weren't just random bikers. Their jackets bore insignias that the leader recognized immediately. He took a shaky breath, his arrogance vanishing completely. This wasn't just a random encounter anymore. This was bigger than he ever imagined, and he had just stepped into something way over his head. Engines rumbled as the second group of bikers rolled in, their presence undeniable. They were bigger, more organized, and carried an energy that sent an unspoken warning. The leader of the original group went rigid, his earlier arrogance replaced with something closer to fear. He recognized the patches on their jackets. These weren't just random riders, they were well known, and not the kind of people you wanted to cross. James watched it all unfold with quiet satisfaction. The man from the SUV still hadn't raised his voice, hadn't made a single threat, yet somehow, everything was falling into place just as he had planned. The leader swallowed hard and turned back to James, his voice quieter now. "Look, man, we didn't mean anything by it, just a misunderstanding." James tilted his head. "A misunderstanding?" He let the words hang in the air before shaking his head. "No, you saw me, and you thought I was an easy target. That was your mistake." The sun blazed down on a quiet parking lot as James, a wheelchair-bound man, rolled toward his car after grabbing a few groceries. Just as he reached for the door handle, a group of bikers pulled up, their loud engines roaring. At first it seemed like they were just passing through, until one of them sneered and blocked his way. "Where you headed so fast?" One of them chuckled, towering over him. James kept his cool, even as they started making snide remarks, mocking his disability. The laughter grew louder and tension filled the air. People walked by, but no one stepped in. The bikers clearly thought they had the upper hand. But then James calmly reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and made a quick call. Within moments, their smirks vanished. The color drained from their faces. Something was coming that they never expected. The leader of the bikers, a tall man with a leather vest covered in patches, narrowed his eyes as James spoke into the phone. The rest of the group exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence starting to waver. James wasn't panicked. He wasn't begging. He was just calm, too calm. "You really think calling someone's gonna help you?" One of them scoffed, trying to mask his nervousness. James didn't respond. He simply placed his phone back in his pocket and folded his arms. Silence settled over the parking lot, and for the first time, the bikers weren't laughing. A few minutes passed. The leader checked over his shoulder, as if expecting something, or someone, to show up. The others shuffled their feet, their tough act starting to crack. James glanced at his watch, then smirked. "You might want to stick around," he said. "This is about to get interesting." The parking lot felt different now, quieter, heavier. The bikers, who had been so sure of themselves just minutes ago, were shifting uncomfortably. A couple of them stole glances toward the road, as if expecting to see something coming. James, still seated in his wheelchair, watched them with a knowing expression. He didn't look scared. If anything, he looked amused. The leader of the group clenched his jaw, clearly trying to hold onto his authority. "You really think someone's coming to save you?" he asked, forcing a smirk. James raised an eyebrow. "You tell me." A low rumble echoed in the distance, not from the bikers' own engines, but something else. It was deep, steady, and growing louder. The leader frowned, his fingers twitching at his side. The others were no longer talking. Then, from the corner of the lot, a car pulled in. Not just any car. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows. It rolled to a slow stop, and the engine cut off. No one moved. No one spoke. One of the younger bikers leaned over. "Who was that?" he muttered under his breath. James just smiled. "Someone who doesn't take kindly to bullies." The driver's door clicked open, and a man stepped out. He wasn't dressed like law enforcement, but there was something about him, something controlled, deliberate. His eyes swept the scene, landing on James first, then the bikers. His expression didn't change, but there was weight in his silence. The leader of the bikers straightened his shoulders. "Hey, man, this ain't got nothing to do with you," he said, though his voice lacked the same arrogance from earlier. The man ignored him and looked at James. "You good?" James nodded. "Oh yeah, just having a conversation." The bikers weren't laughing anymore. The tension had flipped. They weren't in control of this situation anymore, and they knew it. But they had no idea just how bad things were about to get. A heavy silence hung in the air, thick with uncertainty. The bikers, once full of smug confidence, now looked uneasy. The man from the SUV didn't move much. He didn't have to. There was something about him. His presence alone shifted the entire energy of the parking lot. The leader of the bikers forced a laugh. "Look, man, we were just messing around. No harm done." His voice carried a forced casualness, but his hands were tense at his sides. James tilted his head. "Messing around, huh? That's what we're calling it." The man from the SUV took a slow step forward. His gaze flickered to each of the bikers, studying them one by one. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make threats. But the way he looked at them was enough to send a chill down their spines. The woman looked away, shame creeping onto her face. I thought I was helping," she stammered. But the weight of what she had done was undeniable. The officer turned to the father. "Sir, we're deeply sorry for this misunderstanding. You're free to go." The father nodded, taking his daughter's hand. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's go home." As they walked away, the woman stood frozen, watching them leave. She had been so sure, so convinced she was doing the right thing. But now all she'd feel was regret. And as the father disappeared into the distance with his daughter, she realized the truth. Sometimes, assumptions cause more harm than the danger we think we see. As the father and daughter walked away, the little girl squeezed his hand. "Daddy, why did that lady think I wasn't yours?" she asked, her innocent eyes searching his face. He took a deep breath, crouching down to meet her gaze. "Sometimes, people don't understand what they see," he said gently. "They make guesses without knowing the truth." She thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "That's silly," she said. "You're my dad. You always will be." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That's right." Behind them, the woman stood frozen,